Everyone, Dr. Ali Mattu here. In this video, my buddy Mick and I are going to talk about empathy from the perspective of a psychologist and a photographer and how you can apply it to your life today. Mick is my old college roommate and we met here at UCLA. And Mick, you are a photographer. You got your own channel. What's your channel's name?
Mick Millman. That's my channel name. I cover all sorts of topics on photography. I try to stay away from gear review and focus on the art of photography, the craft of it, and a lot of philosophical stuff when it comes to photography.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of like most of the conversations we had at our dorm room where we just stay up late talking about like the world. When you brought up this idea of like talking about empathy, I was so psyched about it because empathy is a big part of my job as a psychologist. I didn't really think about it, but it's a big part of your job as a photographer. So how does empathy play out in your life?
I think it plays out differently depending on the situation or the type of job even.
Yeah.
Where let's say you're working with someone one-on-one, like you're shooting headshots, being able to connect with them quickly. Like I say all the time, what I do for a living is read people. Like that's what I'm really doing. And that's like one of the hardest things to actually teach, I think, when it comes to photography. I can teach you about shutter speed, aperture, and all that, but maybe you can speak to this further, but I think teaching people how to work with people or connect with people is probably the most difficult.
Absolutely. When we're training new therapists, it is so hard to teach these skills. Like we can teach them on like, all right, how do you develop like a treatment plan for anxiety, or like if you're evaluating someone, what's bipolar depression versus depression? That's easy. The hard stuff is how do you connect with someone, and how do you find compassion for things that are very hard to be compassionate for? What is empathy? Like how would you define it?
Being able to not just sympathize, but actually understand someone, how they feel about something.
And this is why I love Nick. So like most people confuse those two things, empathy and sympathy. It's the kind of the difference between like, all right, someone's got a runny nose. If you have empathy, you give them a tissue, right? Like you know what they need, you know what they're experiencing. Sympathy is like, you got a runny nose, I got a runny nose.
Right, and you don't necessarily need to have had a runny nose. Of course, everyone has had that, but like I think, and that might be a personality trait, right? Being able to project yourself into someone else's shoes, not necessarily having experienced that, but being able to understand what that must feel like. Which my understanding is that plays into creativity a lot too. Like creative people tend to have more empathy. Am I correct?
Yeah, you kind of need to, like if you're a writer, you can write about yourself, but you also need to be able to understand like other characters and flesh out points of view that might be alien to you. And like you see that in painters, you see that in photographers. How does it play out for you, like in the work you're doing? You said a lot of what you do is reading people.
Basically, I need to build a rapport quickly, and I do that honestly by caring about people. I care about people. I make eye contact. I ask questions. My follow-up questions are typically genuine. Like if they say something interesting, I'm going to follow up on that rather than just saying another question. Like I've noticed that's been a trend in interviews lately. I've always thought most interviews on TV were a little off, where it's like they had a list of questions, but a real conversation, you're actually listening to what the person said and then asking a follow-up question that's genuine, like you're actually curious. And I am curious about people.
Were you just like always curious about people? Because I think this is one reason why you and I connected. Like, I mean, I'll be honest with you all, like, when we first met each other, like, I didn't know how this was going to play out. Because I was trying to move into the dorm first, because I wanted the bed that was, like, had the desk below and the bed above. You came first. You came, like, the day before. And you claimed that spot.
I'm from LA, and I learned, my mom, I think, figured out you're allowed to move in a day early if you want. And we're like, let's do it.
Because I was like moving, I like got there like 8 a.m. Like I was like, I'm gonna get that, and I ended up getting like.
But you weren't even the second person to move in. I think Ken was.
I think Ken was, because I've like probably slept in.
This guy slept through college, believe it or not. Smart guy, but he slept most of the time.
I really love to sleep. But like I was kind of pissed at you at the beginning, and I didn't know what this was gonna be like. But you know, one thing I remember is you and I were always both curious about people. One of my favorite things about my job is every new person I meet is a new story. You know?
Right.
And I think that's probably a part of your work too.
Right, yeah. One thing about photography is you need to love the person you're photographing. You have to like them. Like, every person I photograph, it sounds corny, but in a way I fall in love with them. I see the most beautiful aspects of them. I'm never like, screw this person. I think they're beautiful no matter who I'm photographing.
Yeah.
I do think they're absolutely beautiful. And so if you don't like the person, is this going to be a problem? Sorry.
Probably, but we've been talking through it. So.
All right. If you don't like the person, you're not going to be able to photograph them. You're not going to be able to paint them in a sorry for the pun, but in a flattering light. Sorry.
I like that pun.
But so I think you can work on these things, and I can tell you about that if you want. But I think I'm still curious if you can't really teach someone empathy, can you?
So you can teach people empathy skills. And something you said about like finding the beauty in every person really connected with me, because so much of my job is about connecting with the humanity in the other person.
Right.
And I think it's like a similar idea we're both getting at. Like, no matter what someone's gone through, whether they're very young or very old, or they're in prison, or they're, a very successful person, or they're completely bankrupt, everyone's has gone through stuff. Everyone's gone through struggles. Everyone's loved. Everyone's had their heart broken. And any emotion that someone is experiencing is valid for them. It might not fit the facts. Like, I might be thinking Mick actually hates me and this is all a show. That feeling might not fit the facts, but I'm still feeling it.
Right.
So like, so much of what I do has to be about understanding that and understanding that humanity, and I think there's beauty there.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Some of the stuff we teach is like real listening. Like the cheesy therapist word is active listening.
Right.
But it's not just being like, oh yeah, tell me more. But it's like actually listening and then me reflecting back what I think you said.
Right.
And checking in, like, is that it? And then me, like, going a deeper level of empathy, like, trying to understand what that experience must be like for you, where I might be like, wow, that sounds like it must have been such a confusing time for you to go through that. Checking in, is that it? And we're trying to get deeper and deeper and deeper, and, like, the deepest level of empathy is me sometimes, like, if I'm hearing an incredibly difficult thing, like, I might start crying in the middle of a session.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that doesn't make you like overly sensitive. Like having empathy. Like, I'll admit, if a movie is able to hit that note, like something where I can genuinely feel, like, I will cry.
Yeah.
And there's nothing soft about that.
Yeah.
That's actually a strength, being able to empathize with people's plight. And like just yesterday, I think on the radio, I heard something about another bombing, and just like the image that was described, like, made me cry.
I was watching Queer Eye a couple of nights ago, and the story in that episode just like hit me. It hit me hard, and I just lost it. I just started crying.
Being able to identify that moment that people can connect with, that's what a good photographer does. Like, as a photographer, my job isn't to just, you should never raise the camera to just take a shot. You see people all the time walking around, raise the camera, take a shot, get a new point of view. A great photographer is going to look for moments, genuine moments that they're connecting with, that then the viewer will connect with as well.
Oh man, you're echoing something I said the other day to one of our trainees, and it was about like finding the authentic emotion of that session they were having. It's not like we walk into sessions where, like, today I'm going to make my person anxious. Today I want this person to, like, really cry about their relationship with their dad. No, it's about, like, you and I meeting and having this moment, and I'm just trying to help create the environment where you need to experience the thing that you need to experience. Like, I'm just trying to lay down the foundation for you to have the experience that you need to have. But I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know where that's going to take us. That's where I think a lot of therapists kind of mess up, is they try to force it down a certain path, kind of like what you were saying, just like pick up your camera and shoot.
I gave this example, and it just reminds me of this, yesterday teaching a class where I was talking about back when I shot weddings, how the best shots you can get were those in-between moments. Like if you're shooting formals and you get all the groomsmen together, it's the in-between moments that speak the most to people, that like people really love. Like when they're laughing and talking to each other, you know, vibing off each other, right? But I've seen photographers get visibly frustrated that they're talking when they need to get their formal shots done.
Right,
I'm like, oh man, dude, you're missing the best shots. They'll put their camera down, pout, and be upset. And instead of just like observing and letting that resonate with them, but they're instead stuck to an agenda, like I need to get my formal shot.
There's a very similar trend in therapy where there's a lot of manualized treatments, where session 1 you do this, session 2 you do that, session 4 you do that, right? You got to work someone through this protocol. And one of the things I push back with my trainees is like someone comes in and they had like this really tough argument and there's stuff going on. Don't just like shove down protocol 4 for session 5, because that's where you are in treatment. We should never ignore the emotion in the room.
Some people may not have the ability to do what you do, and so they need a template. Like people that aren't natural teachers need a template, for example.
Well, I need a template sometimes, you know?
There's nothing wrong with having a template. It's when you're not able to deviate, when you recognize something happening, or when you recognize a lesson to be taught. I'm a teacher, so...
We were just talking about this over coffee. Like, you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. And especially when you're learning and you're a student, you don't have the context and the experience to draw from to know when to deviate here. Speaking of experience, you were telling me something like I found really interesting. You said you can kind of predict when someone's about to smile. I can kind of predict when someone's about to cry. And maybe you can too.
I'm sure I can.
I can't predict smiles because that's I don't know what this is saying, but that's less a part of my work. Smiles.
But you can most likely. You just haven't been as conscious of it.
Maybe.
Like I tell my students, I have the benefit of shooting like millions of photos over a career of like 10 years, right? So I've practiced a lot, and it wasn't a conscious thing like, hey, I'm going to learn to predict a smile. It's something I noticed I did, and I developed more and more through practice, so repetition, and it's little subtle cues, like it's in their eyes mostly, right?
For crying, it's in the eyes and it's in the voice. It's like you know the calm before the storm. You feel it in the air. It's like that in the room. I know it's about to happen, and then I'll ask this question, Mick, and it always gets them there. I'm like, I drop my voice too. I lean in, and I'm like, what are you experiencing right now? And that sudden awareness, because people are trying to like push it away usually, and sometimes you need to do that because you got 5 minutes until you got to go, and you got like they have the rest of their life. But sometimes like we need to understand what's happening, and I'll ask them that, and usually that's unleashes it. If you wanted to give some tips to folks about how to be a more empathetic photographer and just like, shooting off their camera phones and trying to like better capture and better connect with their kids, their friends, their partners, like what should people be doing?
I think number one is to practice presence, being present with the person and not thinking about other things and just observing, like being in the moment, like what's happening. When I used to shoot more portrait sessions, right? And I would get engagement sessions and family sessions. I had, rather than a posing method, I had a placement method where I would find my composition, I would find the light, I would place my subject in an area and then let them interact. So,
that makes so much sense.
You don't take a couple in love. You do not need to tell them how to hold hands. You don't need to tell them how to interact, how to look at each other, but that's what photographers do.
Yeah,
you find the light, your job is to find the light,
Yeah.
place them in that light in a nice composition, let them interact naturally. If you're a good photographer,
Yeah.
you can kind of melt away into the background.
Yeah.
They can be fully present, you're there, but they're comfortable with you. So you can melt away into the background and document if you're a good photographer.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with shutter speed, aperture, and composition.
Yeah.
This has to do with being comfortable, with letting them be comfortable with you.
Which is so much related to exactly what I do, especially if I'm doing couples work or family work. You know, a lot of that initial work is me just creating this environment where they can be themselves, and then
Right.
for me to understand kind of what's happening here. Big tip I want to share, which you just reminded me of, is if you want to be more empathetic as a friend, as a partner, as all of these sort of things, just reflect back. Like actually listen to the person and don't say, oh yeah, I know, or that sucks, but reflect back. So if you say like, you know, it's really frustrating to me that like photographers are like doing this, that, and that, I'd be like, wow, it sounds like this is going on, you know, or this sounds like a pretty big challenge, like how you see things and where your field is headed. What's that like for you? You know, like actually reflect back and check in. Is this actually what the person's thinking?
Right.
So much is lost in just this.
Right.
You know?
Or even just saying, like you said earlier, I think, just like, that must have been tough.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
What questions do you have about empathy? How do you try to practice empathy in your life? Let us know in the comments below. Mick, so good to see you, buddy. It's so good to see you. So good catching up. Thanks
Yeah.
for being on the Psych Show.
Yeah.
Where can people find more of your work?
MickMillman.com to check out my work. You can go to Instagram @retrograding. You can check out my YouTube channel. Just search Mick Millman. I'm sure Dr. Ali Mattu will
I got
will
the link
it for you guys.
Link in the doobly-doo below.